We're back. This is the recap episode for not only this weekend's Black Canyon 100K, but seemingly out of nowhere, although there's always planning behind the scenes, the Black Canyon 50K became an item this year as well. The 60K was always kind of a thing, but I feel like the 50K, I don't know what you guys felt, but to me, it felt like it was increasingly sharing center stage, and you were both in it. So, Brett, starting with you, talk about this race.
Well, yeah, having done the 60K last year and then the 50K this year, they were two completely different monsters of races. Like the 60K last year definitely felt like a casual, just like the next day, people are there. Like most people were just like wanting to complete the distance, maybe not quite ready for the 100K yet, but there wasn't really anyone other than Eli who seemed like he was really just opening up his season with a new sponsor, like just going to go do it. But this year it was like, as soon as the race started and we were doing the like 300 meters on the track, we're going like 5-minute pace on the track. And I'm like 3-4 rows back. And it's like, okay, this is a thing now. This is a real, like, it's its own entity. And then, like coming down out of the high school and onto the road. I looked at my watch and it's like slightly downhill and I was going like 5:30 pace. And I can already just see the pack in front of me, like just striding out. And I was just like, oh, I had a hunch it was going to be like this, but I was really hoping it wasn't. But okay. We'll just see what happens in the next like 15 miles.
I got to say one thing before Jeff chimes in, and that is, two things. One, this race absolutely deserved, there was so much depth. We deserve to talk about the top 10 here. You nabbed that 10th spot, but the thing that I loved the most, people should go check out Brett's Strava, because in your title, you do something that very few people do, and that's you admit that there was nothing more left in the tank. You were like, I could not have gone a second faster. In a world of people who are throwing excuses left and right, whatever, like an aid station error, not my day, mentally, whatever, you're just like, not a second faster. I put everything out there. It was amazing.
I think it's really special when you get to be able to say something like that. And I fully understand, like, there's so many races where I finished, most of my races I finished, and I can't say that, but on Sunday, I can confidently say, I was like, I went out aggressive. On paper, it looked like I went out smart because I was off the like lead men, but I was being aggressive and I got dropped by the lead men. But like I was still running equally as dumb in my mind, because I was on the 100K men's splits through the first 2 aid stations, and then I lost a few minutes through Bumblebee, but I was still a full dozen minutes faster this year to Bumblebee than last year. And then I didn't slow down. I was convinced that my splits last year from Bumblebee to like the 50K-ish mark were going to be way faster, but it was almost to the second the same. So I just went out way harder and didn't slow down somehow. So, and I definitely hurt way more this year around. Like I had more confidence going into the commentating 50K double that I was like willing to roll the dice and see what happened. And yeah, it was really cool that it just worked out that way. And yeah, I finished and I was like absolutely trashed, and it was cool.
Jeff, you did the double too.
Did the double. I actually told Zach Marion, I was like, hey man, I need at least an hour behind the microphone and camera if I'm going to get, accepted into the media 50K by Brett. And I wasn't optimistic that I was going to win the 50K per se. I chose that race for a number of reasons, but I was really excited that Jeshurun Small and Brian Whitfield and Chris Meyer were running it. And I wanted to race fast people. That's typically what I want to do. But I was like, maybe I can at least get some small victory out of this if I can do some media and beat Brett. To reiterate Brett's point, I also felt like I was running far too fast for the first couple miles and was just losing contact. And was like, wait, I'm like, on Thursday in training, I did a 6-mile tempo at 6-minute pace, and I like almost hit 6-minute pace. I think I averaged like 6:05s. So all of a sudden we start this race and the first 3 miles are all under 6. And then at 10 miles, I'm in like 59:50. Like, all right, I'm just running faster than I've run pretty much in a calendar year for any amount of distance for 10 miles now. Let's string it out to like 20 miles. When we went through Bumblebee, the leaders of the 50K, Jesh and Adam Vadabancourt, they were on pace to run like a 3:10.
Yeah, it was they went through like 155 through Bumblebee or something.
Yeah, I went through Bumblebee in like I think 158 and was still a couple minutes like back. But what we see with the 50K this year, to your point, Finn, is Black Canyon's got the hype. I think Aravaipa with Mountain Outpost has done such a good job of creating this event that so many people want to tune into, that when there was an opportunity for a new course record, I think that attracted a runner like Jesh to show up, to an opportunity for newcomers to the sport to maybe like try things out. I think we saw that with our triathlete contingent, Eric and Chris entering in. And in general, like Black Canyon is a amazing proving ground. So I think like it's attracting new talent to the sport because there's actually some notoriety around it now. You're getting people coming out from New York City run clubs, from San Francisco, kind of from outside or trail adjacent. They're doing a great job of making it cool and making it relevant.
Okay. One thing I want to ask you about, because you said something interesting. You said that, and by the way, you're a phenomenal athlete. I think Brett and I have both been singing your praises for all. Brett thinks you're a well below sub 220 marathoner if you train for it. I'm pretty sure I've heard Brett say, but I heard you just say there that basically you were racing fairly well above the splits that you were hitting in your workouts. Can you explain that phenomenon of like rising to the occasion on race day kind of above what your workouts would indicate? Because that's impressive.
I mean, some of that is I'm working out in Colorado where there's icy roads, and I'm on a treadmill that is in the corner over here being used as a drying rack. It's like super unreliable, both with time and pace and distance. So a lot of like what I'm working with is kind of like guessing. I know like the feel, I know my heart rate right now at certain RPE levels, but I had a dry afternoon on Thursday. I just went and did 6 miles, like, steady state, what I would consider race effort. And it felt pretty good. I was like, I think I can run a marathon at 6-minute pace right now. Let's see if I can translate this to the trail. Maybe a marathon at 6-minute pace on the Black Canyon course would allow me to run at least a mile with Jeshrin and Brian and the lead guys. Turns out I was wrong. I shared 0 steps with Jesh. I saw Chris Meyer's very bright Brooks singlet ahead of me for, about 19, 20 miles of the race until I lost sight of it. But some of that is like we train trying to find, in many ways, like comfort at certain levels. And more than anything, I'm trying to find familiarity. I'm doing, harder sprint efforts or maybe 60-second strides. And those 60-second strides might be way faster, right? They might be, sub 4-minute pace, but that's not what I expect my race pace to be. So on that day, you put me in a desert environment with good competition, and ideally I've done everything right up until that point. The goal is to be able to rise kind of above, some of the training paces I've been hitting. I can't say I did everything right. I forgot to pick up my bib the day before. There were some last minute stressors, but I was super happy with the 50K field on the men's and women's side. I think it definitely made a statement in terms of a first year. I remember thinking that coming by Gloriana Mine of like, it's going to be pretty hard for men's or women's course records to be broken next year. The first year of this race is kind of a statement piece, and, I'll sing Allison Baca and Jesh's praises like on any field. They're incredible athletes. But yeah.
Brett, the Singletrack Conversational Pace Hybrid team is currently 1-0 versus the Boulder Boys in 2025. What do you think?
I mean, I'm just glad that there was more snow on the ground in Boulder than in Ashland. Well, I guess no, not even in Boulder, but like I mean, Adam's training over in Maine right now. So like some of his runs was like single digit temps, and he's just like a bunch of flat stuff to run on. So, yeah, I mean, I was just glad that I was able to hold my own. I don't want this. Are we trying to turn this into some sort of rivalry, Finn?
No, I just I think I'm just sad right now because Mike is injured and I don't have a rivalry anymore because he will be at TGC, and so I'm trying to manufacture stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the pressure's on, Finn. You just have to continue the trend of fast media guy, or else you're not invited to the next podcast. It'll just be me. I'd say
in general, there were some impressive media runners out there, and like I think at the end of the day, the Boulder Boys kind of won the weekend. You know, Seth had a truly historic performance. I think Subhub Podcast won the weekend. Yeah. I think there's a number of runners who are also trying to create community through podcasting, writing, sharing their experience that really knocked it out of the park this weekend.
Subhub is just becoming the hub.
Yeah, there's no sub in that hub anymore.
I know. I think after 200K like slam dunks, MK, I have MK in my list of people who are the jump up from the 50K. Like, why are we seeing these times get so much faster? Why are we seeing this huge improvement? We'll get to the women's course record. 30 minutes is just crazy. But like the men's course record, huge improvement over last year on what a lot of people defined as like Hayden's, like, you know, stamp on Black Canyons. There's amazing talent stepping up from 50K and bringing way more speed into the mix. And like Eli coming through the Deep Canyon Ranch 50K split in 3:30 and bringing Seth with him. You know, there were only 3 guys in the 50K, which was a strong field, that ran faster than those 2.
Yeah, that's why I kind of feel like I didn't beat the Boulder Boys, because Seth ran significantly faster in the 50K than I did. And he wasn't even in my race. He was just like, that was halfway through and he like destroyed me. So I don't know if I know some people wrote into your question box of like, Brett beat the Boulder Boys. I'm like, well, I don't know about that, because the one who really crushed me raced on Saturday.
Brett, I think this is interesting. Like, just focusing on Eli for a second, you could, from a viewership standpoint, watching the live stream from home, you could come to the conclusion that, you know, this is his second attempt at sort of the ultra distance, at least 50 miles and above. JFK back in November, Black Canyon now, and he's like come up sort of barely short in the second half of both of those races. But like to what Jeff said there, maybe we give him a lot more credit than you would originally come to the conclusion of, because he kind of paid dearly, but he brought the whole field to sort of a new level of heights, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know he said in like his Chasing Gold interview before the race that he was like, I'm not going to lead. I'm not going to be that guy. But then he ended up being that guy. It reminded me a lot of like Cole 2 years ago when Anthony won, where, you know, he just went to the front and started pushing at like maybe Bumblebee or something, or a little bit after. And, you know, he ultimately ended up overheating and, you know, having a pretty long rough patch after Black Canyon City. But, you know, I think because of that push, it did kind of kickstart that gear for the people behind him to then keep it rolling. And, you know, when you have that many people, you know, a lot of times there's one person that comes out of it, maybe even more. And yeah, it was really interesting to see, you know, like Seth survive, but then and Will too. But then you had like someone like Joe move up. I think he said at the first aid station he was in like 35th place or something like that.
But what was the time differential there, though? Was it like just a few minutes, or was it actually fairly?
You know, it was somewhat significant at Deep Canyon Ranch. It was 4 or 5 minutes at Deep Canyon Ranch. There's 2 things that you just made me think of. And one is a runner who defines the race, even if they don't win it, right? We're talking about this like Steve Prefontaine effect.
The most aggressive rider award.
Yeah, right. Like the person who's going to shape the race. In the 3,000 meter Milrose Games, like Cole Hawker shaped that race, even though Grant Fisher got the W. But there's the person who shapes the race, and maybe in this case that was Eli. And then there's the like, but how impressive is it that this person held on for second? And I remember a couple of years ago, I actually tried to make the argument that Mathieu Blanchard's finishing second to Killian at UTMB and pushing Killian to that course record, but also holding on was like incredibly impressive. And like maybe the second, if not maybe the first most impressive performance of the year. Like, I think in this case, what you had in the women's race was those are the same person. Like Riley Brady was the most aggressive runner who completely shaped the race. And like, you know, I think there's so much to be said about Tara Dower's performance. And Finn, we sidelined a little bit about this, and I loved listening to your interview with her. Tara has just amazing range, and so cool to see her step up and get that golden ticket here and not have to like try again at Canyons. I don't think anyone ran as flawless of a race on Saturday as Riley. And like, we watched Seth do cooling well. We watched Seth actually manage his systems well and have really solid pacers who were kind of guiding him and making sure like he didn't mess up. Riley, sans pacers, Riley nailed every single, you know, cooling opportunity, moved efficiently through aid stations, and just like didn't miss a beat, and didn't have anyone like pushing them to, you know, it's like, oh, you know, the other women in the race like pushed Riley to kind of get that time. Riley just time trialed that.
Yeah, and Riley did it
like
didn't
such
blow
a pro.
Riley didn't blow it in the first 20 miles either. You know, like was in contact, but I mean, Mary was like way off the front through even Hidden Treasure, and Riley wasn't there. But then Riley made like the right move at the right time coming out of Gloriana, and then just fully committed to it. You know, kind of like you said, like didn't miss a beat. And like, I think it's scary making that pass, you know, for the lead, especially like 24 miles in. That's not far into the race, and it's like, okay.
And contrast that with Seth's pass on Eli. That was like 49 miles into the race, right?
Yeah.
Right before Table Mesa, kind of going through the wash there. So like Seth's approach of like, I'm going to sit on Eli's shoulder and like basically take meticulous notes. And he made some of those notes out loud to you, Brett. Like it was evident that Eli wasn't stopping for water at a deep canyon. He did not leave with an ice bandana. Seth left with an ice bandana. You know, 74 degrees, was feeling very hot at that point, out there commentating. So, you know, in Seth's case, like he let Eli kind of set the pace and then stepped up when it was his time to make the move, and still an incredibly impressive race going, 10 minutes under. Hayden's course record is crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, like even at Hidden Treasure, like mile 14 of the top, maybe 20 guys, Seth was the only one that refilled a bottle there, which means he was probably also the only one who was drinking a decent amount of fluid up until that point.
What do you attribute that to, Brett? Like when in the moment, is it just pandemonium and just chaos?
I think, it's
people,
just pure
it's people not wanting to
caught
lose contact and getting caught in it. It's in the 50K too. Like I didn't see what Jesh did, or I think the front group was Brian, Jesh, and Adam in the 50K. But, you know, I came through, and the couple guys I was around, Wade Hall, Chris Leiferman, like they were blowing through aid stations pretty quick. And like I'd fill up my water, try to get some ice or, you know, get sponged. And you saw it later in the race with, I think, 4 guys in the 50K faded hard. But people want to like stay in contact, and they think that 10 seconds is going to cost them. And realistically, it costs them 10 minutes.
Yeah. It's like that panic mindset. You know, you see someone like Eli or McConaughy like blow through the aid station, they're in first. You're like, oh crap. Like maybe they even were planning on stopping, but you're like, well, if they're not stopping, I'm not stopping because I have to match them blow for blow, or else I'm going to lose contact and then it's over. Whereas, Seth had the confidence to know, like, one, that's dumb. Two, I can fill my bottle and I will catch back up to them. Like, it's not going to burn more matches than I'm saving.
It's interesting to, like, just based on all this, it's interesting to note that in 2025, we have a lot of the answers for high performance, but at the end of the day, there's still plenty of problems of execution to be passed around.
Yeah, you still have to do it.
You still have to do it.
You have to be able to think during these races. And
that was Drew Holman at the finish line being like, ice and carbs. The recipe's clear. Just do it. Ice and carbs. To anyone who would listen. It was like, ice and carbs. Like,
and first you pizza, then you French fry. First you pizza.
It's like, I mean, if the Mr. Consistent Racer says ice and carbs, then I'm going ice and carbs.
And again, ice on a 75-degree day might not seem that important to a lot of people who haven't been in that environment. If you watch the live stream and you saw how like bleached it looked and how bright it was, like the ground has like, it's dirt and salt and it's like way more reflective and radiant than it might seem. That 75 degrees with no shade, full exposure, and like radiating off of a hot surface. Mm-hmm. I would say it feels more like a 90-degree heat elsewhere. And, we saw some runners in the women's race running like with gloves on for sun protection. Like, I've always thought polymer cooling is like a key part of staying cool in the desert. So there were some interesting things I observed in the 100K and the 50K. But 75 degrees can be definitely hot enough to totally go awry on your hydration and to mess up active cooling.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought of the temperatures of like, if this were the start line of a marathon and we knew that, midway through the race, the high was going to hit 75, people would be talking about that being like a historically hot year. This is terrible. And it's like, okay, well then in ultra running, why is all of a sudden 75 not hot? Like, yeah, you're not trying nearly as hard as marathon effort, but it's definitely still going to be a detriment to performance. So you should probably do something about it.
Yeah. By the way, I love this race shaper designation. I know like there's other terms for it, and like the archetype is, at least on the men's side, is Zach Miller. But I kind of love it. And like in future previews, I want to have that label that we can bucket people under. And I think maybe it was more relevant for the men's field this year, but I think, and I couldn't put my finger on it until you kind of created the name for it. But I besides Eli, I think one of the glaring elements of this field was there weren't that many people that I felt like were going to go out there and risk their race necessarily, at least on their own island, and huge credit to Eli. I think that's part of what makes A, races exciting, and B, that's what ultimately I think enables people to run, whatever, sub 7:30 or close to it.
Yeah, I will say, like, for the men's 50K, Brian Whitfield was that guy. Like, he was trying to push it early and I think make a statement next to Jesh, who is definitely one of his contemporaries. I think they both actually went to Western and Gunnison together. I might be wrong about that, so sorry, guys. But Brian, like, I think he had an Instagram post afterwards that was just like, I didn't refill my bottles. I bonked. Like, that's it. Like, if you're going to be the person out there trying to set the pace, like, you also need to be taking care of yourself. And when you do that, like, you might have a day like Riley had, or like Allison had. And Brett, to your point, yeah, ultras take longer than a marathon, right? So like, you're going to be out there in the full heat and it's going to accumulate, and like, you'll be out there for longer and longer. It's so much easier to get behind. And Gloriana Mine to Deep Canyon, that's like a 7-mile segment.
That's
without
a hot segment too.
If you just took one bottle there, like, that might have been the nail in the coffin for you. That's where the race gets harder. And like, that could have been the end.
Yeah. I did that in the 50K and it was so close to being just a full blown disaster because I only brought one bottle with me. And just because I had in my mind last year, like the distance not being that far, but that was because there was one more aid station right around the 30-mile mark, but it was like probably still 2 miles before the actual finish of the 50K. And it was still high up on the ridgeline. So I was like, in my head, I was like, oh no, it's fine. Like I'll get there. Dude, I was like the last 20, 25 minutes, no water, just like on the verge of cramping every single time I went up a hill. And it was, yeah, like that was just luck. Like I got lucky right there at the end.
Sorry to be an old timer here, but before they introduced Deep Canyon Ranch, you went from Gloriana Mine to Black Canyon City. And that was like a 9-10 mile like stretch so or something like that. And there was just a table kind of near where the Deep Canyon Ranch Road was that just had water bottles on it. And I remember being like, I definitely need this. Am I allowed to take this? And being like, there is no one here in the desert around me. I'm definitely drinking this water. But that's where like those creek crossings, mile 34 or whatnot, like play such a huge role. And I remember also carrying, I think, a vest. I think I had 3 bottles with me when I ran that year. So like not having the hydration, you can nail all your carbs. If you don't have the hydration and the cooling to go with it, it's still not going to add up well for you.
Mm-hmm.
We had maybe 8 or 9 people in the comment box ask something along the lines or state something along the lines of, high carb fueling causing stomach problems, all related to Black Canyon. And I think one of the questions or comments that I wanted to throw out to you guys is like, are we getting too like over concerned with like a specific threshold to hit? Like, are we getting too obsessed with 120 or 100 and maybe we should be varying intake based on the race type and the terrain and the conditions? Like I know in the Tour de France, for example, on any given day of the tour, based on the stage, based on the conditions, like they're going anywhere from like 110 to 150, and also speed, and like Black Canyon is different than UTMB, which is different than Western, which is different from JFK. So I'm curious to like maybe Brett, starting with you, like when you kind of heard this being trotted out, like sort of the high carb issues, where do you land on this?
I mean, it's one of the known risks is just like if you're really pushing high carb, all of your other shit better be dialed, or else like it's not going to work. I mean, we see tons of stomach issues come from this, and this is one of those races where every year we see like, is it? I mean, we talked about this in the preview episode. Will the warm temps be enough to cause any distress, or is it just cool enough where it'll be fine for everyone? And like, it was definitely warm enough to cause a lot of distress. And, I think the negligence of the additional cooling and the additional hydration, essentially is going to create a big gut bomb. But I do really like what you said about your point of like, yeah, are these people just being like, oh, well, I hit 100 grams of carbs an hour in training, regardless of what your training conditions are like, probably cooler than this race. Therefore, I'm going to do the exact same thing at this race and assume it's going to work. Like what tweaks would one be making? I guess Jeff, on top of answering Finn's question, I'd love to hear, how you would be like maybe tweaking nutrition coming into something like this, training in a colder area.
Yeah. Finn, your question resonates with me big time. I kind of planned my nutrition out around distance between aid stations with this like rough ballpark of like about an hour between aid stations. That was dumb. I had like 55 grams, of neck drink mix in my first bottle and 225 gram carb like gels.
Yeah.
Prior to getting to mile 7.9, which was at like 44 minutes. So I was like at 105 grams of carbs, like 44 minutes in, and I didn't think about recalibrating then. And so then by the time that I got to Hidden Treasure, I had another 55 grams of drink mix, carbs through drink mix, and another 2. I was at like 200 grams of carbs, and I was an hour and 25 minutes into the race. And I was like, wait, my belt started off so heavy.
Oh my God.
How
Dude,
is it already so light? And I was like, I'm running way faster than I've ever run in training with this like carb plan. And, you know, what I did was I still ended up hitting the numbers I was trying to hit for the whole race. Basically 350 grams of carbs or so. Like I think I was like maybe 390 or something, 1,500 calories. But unfortunately, I'd had like more than half of those in the first hour and 20 minutes. And so that was a moment for me. It did sit. Yeah, it ended up being all right. I had a couple questionable burps in there, but I more so was like, I'm just moving so much faster than I typically practice my nutrition with. And like, I think, you know, I was operating as between aid stations when what I really needed to be operating with was like a cadence from my, from my watch. The other thing I committed to was like, I started with a bottle full of drink mix, and then I started with an empty bottle that had drink mix already in it. And so I probably should have taken water at the second aid station in the bottle I'd already finished instead of filling up the next one with drink mix, because I needed the fluids big time. And like, I couldn't have missed those fluids. So once I made that decision to fill that second bottle with more carbs and calories, I was kind of like, oh, I am literally like, I am taking on so much fuel right now. So that's not something I like have thought as much about, and I haven't done as many shorter races. And often when I'm planning for Western states, I am planning around like these chunks of aid stations and what I'm going to consume between each, and then what I'm going to eat at that aid station. So for me, the real lesson was pace. Like if I'm running way faster, I probably do want like a little bit more fuel, but I went too far with that.
Dude, yeah, you ate. By the time you hit Hidden Treasure, I think you consumed as many calories as I did over the course of the entire race. And my reasoning for that is because I have done like 0 high carb, like gut training in my last, my 5-week build to this race. I only did like 1 long run over 2 hours. So it was like, well, I'm not going to try and mess around with like high carb. Like it's going to be a disaster. So like I just went for the mod, the Katie Scheid, what did she call it? Reasonable carb fueling. Like, I was
60 to 90, right?
I went 60. Yeah. I was a 30 gram Never Second gel every 30 minutes just from the start. And for where my gut was at and for the amount of fluid I was consuming, and I was ready to pivot to an electrolyte drink, like around like Bumblebee or Gloriana if I felt like I was starting to run low, but like my stomach actually, like everything felt pretty good. So then I just stuck with it. And the only mistake is I wish I had brought a second bottle that I just kept empty until Gloriana, and then had 2 full bottles from Gloriana to the finish, because
I think that was a mistake a lot of people made.
Yeah. A lot of people just
in the 50K,
Gloriana too.
In the 100K, Gloriana is like the most critical aid station in that race.
Yeah.
For cooling and bringing that second bottle. I chatted with Allison Baco, who won the women's 50K a little bit after the race.
Shout out Allison. I mean, crushed it.
That was a good run.
She was running down guys in front of her so fast toward the end there. But she was like, you know, after Gloriana, I was just waiting for the next aid station. And eventually it dawned on me that I wasn't going to get another aid station, and I should have filled up another bottle. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, it's a easy mistake to make when that trail is like really smooth and pretty fast through that section.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And also like at that point in the race, it was, 20 degrees warmer than at the start. And I just didn't even realize, like, once I left Gloriana, like I drank half my bottle in the next 2 miles, and I was like, I got 6 to the finish.
Yeah. I think that high carb fueling point, or that question that folks asked, I think like there's a couple questions to ask alongside that. And like, one is, did these people go out too fast? Are they actually hydrating as much as they need to be? on top of just like eating high carb foods. And like, there's always just the sense that you travel for races, and like beyond travel, people also get pre-race jitters. Like it was super sad to see a couple racers drop out before the race and, early on in the race thinking they were feeling sick. But I'm certain high carb fueling could be causing stomach problems. I also think there's probably other variables at play, as there often are.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's interesting. And again, this is just from having read a few of these cycling articles before this conversation. And then there were a couple like dietitians and even like a researcher for just various carbohydrate related topics kind of weighed in the DMs. But it's the takeaway for me, at least from the 2 hours I spent on it, is it's not necessarily reasonable carb fueling. It's not necessarily high carb fueling. There's this massive range. It's all nuanced and it's super situational. And like the same rider, depending on the day, the course, the environment, could be going 80 an hour. And on another day, they could be going 140. But it's not this like tight, narrow 130 to 150 space that you kind of like back yourself into. It's really expansive, which kind of blew my mind. And so it made me think like Black Canyon in the 100K yesterday, would the results be different if everyone was just like 70 to 80 because hydration was going to be so difficult and other factors, Anyways.
What did they eat for breakfast, right?
Yeah.
How long was their breakfast before the race?
The pre-race jitters, that's a great point too, of just like so many people who get nervous before races, like they're starting, like their heart rate is elevated, just at the start in this first few miles.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I like to that point, you saw Tara Dower running with a vest and doing like vest swaps instead of handhelds or bottles. Like, I think the runners out there who had really dialed crews, I occasionally love running races without a crew because it just like makes me, I think, more self-reliant and more efficient through aid stations. And, but like, yeah, having someone to hand you 2 bottles or to do that vest swap to ensure you're not making these glaring mistakes, I think is pretty important. And, that's where I don't think it's like, anyone's fault, but like, it's inexperience on, some of these runners who are more 50K specialists jumping up to 100K. Like, you live and you learn. We've all learned these lessons, and we've had the days where we find out that, aid station pickles and like gummy bears are a lethal combo for me. You also have those days where you find out that like, I do really well with like as much salt as I can possibly take. But it takes running 5, 6, really, in my opinion, it takes running 6 hour plus races to understand fueling for 6 hour plus races.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree with that. Like, so many things can seem like they work in training just simply because you haven't gone far enough for it to like really backfire on you. And it's hard to really figure that out shy of going in a race because there's just not that many opportunities where you're probably laying down like a 6 to 8 hour training run at like a harder effort. So yeah, it's just, I don't know, I guess it's just that's part of the sport and part of growing with it.
Yeah. Maybe it's not, it should have been a 70 gram an hour carb day. Maybe it should have been an extra bottle day, and your high carb fueling was a perfect plan, but running with a single handheld. Someone was running with a single Amphibroc in the top 10 in the men's. And I actually was trying to buy an Amphibroc handheld like the week going into the race, because I was like, that would actually be great. It fits really nicely in my shorts. Like, and I couldn't get it in time. But kudos to that person for bringing back the OG stees.
Wait, Brett, we got to get your gear takes. What were some of the coolest or most interesting things that you saw on the ground on Saturday?
Well, what was cool actually was that it was really all over the place. Like Jeff's, like we saw some people with single handhelds. We had other people with vests and like 4 bottles loaded up. They were running right next to each other. I mean, you still see the classic I mean, Seth actually had a pretty cool ice bandana.
Seth also won wearing a Raid belt.
Let's go.
Yeah.
LF2L, baby.
Yeah.
Thanks for the ad, Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I say that. I saw Kyle the other day, and he was like, "Did you wear your Raid belt?" And I was like, "No, I had 7 gels with me, a drink mix packet, and then 2 soft flasks. And like when I have that much, I want to be able to rotate and like use the circular belt function." And I was like, I told him I used the naked belt because like I could access stuff more. And he was like, "Well, Seth won in the Raid belt, so that's what counts." Like, yep, that does count.
And then that allowed Seth to have that third bottle too, because he was rocking 2 handhelds and then I think a third bottle in the back.
Yep.
And then all the fuel in the front. So I think, like going back to Jeff's point, like the people who did make the space for that extra bottle of hydration paid off. From a gear standpoint, the shoes were absolutely all over the place, which I thought was really fascinating and pretty cool. Riley won in the Nike Vaporfly, like the narrowest, lightest super shoe. That seems downright dangerous, but if you're running in it and like you're training in it and you're used to it, probably be okay. And then we saw Tara was wearing the Mont Blanc Carbon. And like Ultra's foam in that shoe is pretty sweet actually. The only like minor red flag for some would be the zero drop. And then MK was in the new Craft Nordlight Ultra Pro, which isn't out yet, but that one doesn't have a plate. I think it has a little carbon shank, but it's got like a TPU blended foam now. So pretty baller
shank.
Foam. Yeah, shank. You could just pull it out and just
Shawshank.
I didn't have a North Face trainer and 2 Brooks shoes on my podium for the men's race.
I was going to say. Yeah.
Because Seth was wearing the North Face Endurus, which I wish I had a chance to chat more with him about that decision, but I imagine it comes down to comfort. Will was wearing the Brooks Catamount 3, and then Joe was wearing a new Brooks Trail prototype that I don't think I'm allowed to name, but I can say that it's actually a pretty like boring shoe. And we've talked about like Joe's shoe choices in the past and how he wore, what was that Brooks Trail shoe?
He wore the Brooks Divide at
the Divide,
Barkley.
yeah, like the budget $100 trail shoe. Like that's been his go-to. So the shoe that he wore was like by all means a pretty like boring shoe, but
if there's one thing that I feel like through hikers or folks who spend long days in their shoes know, it's like comfort is king. Mm-hmm. And I definitely feel that way. Like if it doesn't mean that the, fanciest, flashiest Mont Blanc Carbon or, Speed Gravic, whatever, a Gravic Speed Ultra is like not comfortable. If it's not comfortable for that runner though, it's not the right fit. Yes. So like what works for your foot and what is going to be comfortable over the course of 62 miles, a couple thousand feet of ascending, 7,000 feet of descending, but numerous like big toe stubs, numerous like minor ankle rolls. Mm-hmm. The footing isn't necessarily forgiving for a carbon plate shoe if that's not what's comfortable for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think you guys are already answering the question, but basically what the viewers, the listeners wanted to know in the question box was based on the shoes that made it onto the podiums for the men's and the women's fields. Do you guys feel like these runners were actually performance inhibited based on their shoe tech, or does this call into question like the validity of anything super before the name shoe?
Was Eli wearing the Gravic Speed Ultra?
Yeah,
is that what he was running in? Yeah. Okay, so he got 4th. So there was no Adidas, ASU on the podium for men's or women's.
Yeah.
But I would say that was the most popular shoe I saw at the starting line of the 50K. A lot of folks wearing that.
So many Tecton X3s too.
A lot of Tecton X3s as well. Yeah. And like I think it comes down to like, hey, if you want to buy the flashiest, brightest thing, and maybe you're not as familiar like with, or you haven't done as many trail races, or maybe you're not quite as experienced, and like you read that the ASU is the best trail super shoe and you're doing your first 50K and you buy it, like that might be a blind choice, and you might be better off in that trainer that you're super comfortable in and like wear quite a bit. I am not of the opinion that you should have a training shoe and race shoe by any means. Like if you are doing a race in a shoe, I hope you've done a ton of workouts in that shoe and run a lot in that shoe. And if the question for a like participant is, I really want to get this $240 super shoe, but I can only afford to use it sparingly, in my opinion, that's the wrong shoe. And the advantages you're going to get from having a shoe that's comfortable, that you can train in all the time, far outweigh any advantages that this tech is going to give you.
Yep, dude. Yeah. Preach. Those are the wisest words. I mean, we've said this before on some of our shoe review episodes where we're like, would you race in it? It's like, well, yeah, because it's super comfortable. That's why I would race in it. And yeah, no, I totally agree. It's like, if you have to think about it, and it's like one more thing distracting you, like it's only going to take away from the race. Yeah. And like buying a super shoe doesn't replace fitness either. It's like you see, Joe Schmo with the $15,000 road bike. It's like, well, if you had a $2,000 road bike, but you trained more or trained smarter, that would be faster than you just buying a $15,000 road bike.
See, I want the $15,000 road bike. That's where like, you take me out of my element and out of my lane and running and put me into cycling, and I see someone with a Pinarello and I'm like, can I get
a-hole?
Like, I want that bike.
Yeah, you're right. That's a fair point too.
I love the Boy Scout jerk post where it's like, if you see this guy at a start line, you're effed, and it's like he's wearing like the Ultra Lone Peak 2s that have like 1,000 miles on them. He's got like hammer gel spilling out of his pockets and like a maple syrup soft flask.
The UD handheld with the red nipple.
Like you're screwed. Like your race is over before it even started.
That's the classic. Like if you see someone wearing a Montreal jersey at the start, you're done.
Yeah, you're done. You're done.
Yeah, you're done.
Jeff, what shoes did you end up wearing?
I did wear the Ultra Pro, and I say that like that shoe releases in June. I made decisions to race in that shoe 2 years ago when I shouldn't have, because it wasn't like it was for science. But
that was my shoe choice.
Like, at that time, comfortable and like working for my feet. Mm-hmm. But being part of the iterative process of that shoe from 2022 until like today, for the last, more than the last full calendar year since the shoe's been finalized, like I was able to voice some of those like things of, hey, this isn't comfortable. It's now super comfortable and I get to train it in a bunch. But no carbon plate, nylon plate, but super foam, really, really durable upper. And like more than anything, fits my foot, and I get to train in it a couple days a week, and I know it works.
Hell yeah. Thank you, On, for the nylon plate. Been preaching that for 1 full year now, 2 years. So stoked to see it.
I think we should spend a good bit of time talking about Riley Brady and what they did this past Saturday, and not just this past Saturday, but I guess in back-to-back US-based golden ticket races, winning Javelina and then Black Canyon.
Yeah, wasn't there a good stat for that?
Yes, and it was the Jim Walmsley stat. It was back-to-back golden ticket race wins, right?
Jim was the only person who had done that in the modern golden ticket era.
And I'm sure if Sage is listening, yes, Sage, we acknowledged 2013, I think Montreal Ultra Cup, you did it that year too, I think.
Yes. Modern golden ticket era.
Modern, 2016 onward.
Yeah. So rare air, Jim Walmsley and Riley Brady, back-to-back golden ticket wins.
Thoughts? What did you see out there, Brett? You were on the ground. Jeff, you were too.
So, no. What was I doing? Oh, I guess I just watched the Javelina live stream. I was trying to think. I was like, was I at Javelina this past year?
I was at Javelina.
Yeah. I was just trying to compare the two performances in terms of just kind of like the execution. Like Riley's Javelina was really good, but I think Riley's Black Canyon was even better. Like he was even more, it was more confident. Like every single element of it was just so confident. Like it didn't seem like Riley second guessed anything, and like everything, every move Riley made, every split they hit, I believed it, and like I was like, yep, that's the right decision. Like I can just tell, like I believe it because I'm seeing this right now. And yeah, it was just incredible.
I got to witness both Javelina and Black Canyon. I first met Riley. Riley crewed and paced Ellie in 2022 Western States, and we had like a post race on, meeting around like shoe development and stuff, and Riley was hanging out. And at that point, I had no idea who Riley Brady was or what their running background was. And over the last couple of years, seeing Riley not only have like flashes of excellence, but what Riley's now exhibited is consistency in excellence, which that's something you only see from a couple folks in our sport. And those are the Courtneys, those are the Katies, those are the Jims, those are the Toms. Like the highest echelon of our sport are the folks who can consistently not have a good day, consistently be excellent.
So Riley's done enough to be in that category.
In terms of consistently give excellence, yes.
Two in a row.
I think in terms of reaching, well, 2 in a row, but let's look at golden ticket races in the last couple of years.
Yeah, actually, I don't look back much farther than that.
I'm not necessarily saying Riley Brady is, greatest of all time conversation, which I think Courtney is like easily in. Katie has been knocking on that door the last couple of seasons. What I'm saying is consistency in excellence is something that's very hard to work on and actually iron out. I think Riley has ironed it out. And what I saw at Javelina was maybe the easiest to crew 100 in the country. One of them, Riley nailed it and like came through methodically every lap, showed up to do business and did business. What I saw at Black Canyon, more moving parts, not as easy to crew, not as easy to run. It's a more challenging race in every aspect. And Riley like nailed the fueling, nailed kind of every aid station pass through, and ran in a type of like commanding lead that I think a lot of people saw for the first time ever from Katie Scheid at Canyons last year. And I had the same feeling after this past weekend of like, I just saw excellence, and like, that's kind of where I put Riley's performance. I wanted to get in touch with Riley before this episode just to like hear a little bit about what they were thinking.
Yeah.
And heard back that it's like fueled both by kind of rage for recent executive orders and like love for their friends and community, and wanted to go out and have a day where they didn't have any fueling issues as kind of a touch point for Western States. And if that was the goal, like I think Riley made it very clear they should be a considered contender for like a win at Western States. So we're not talking a top 10 contender. I think we're looking at like a podium contender.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the like jump, like Riley's had some good performance, but also had some like not so great ones with clear some things to dial in. But then the last two, it reminds me a lot of like the Rod Farvard jump, where it's like it was there. There was just like, seemingly for both of them, it seemed like a lot of it was like consistent fueling, issues. And then, we saw Rod's Canyons and then Western States. Riley has 2 excellent races going into Western States now, but we also then saw Rod, go and get second and press Jim the entire day. And yeah, I think Riley's deserves to like absolutely be in that kind of conversation.
Brett, you motivated me to go and check out their ultra sign up, and it's really interesting. It's actually, in a lot of ways, especially if things kind of bear out over the next few years, it's very similar to Courtney's in the sense that Riley has been in the scene since 2014 and really started to get significant sort of big time results outside of the local sort of like mid-Atlantic Northeast scene in 22, 23. And has been targeting Black Canyon since 2019. Like in 2019, and I think 22 was running like mid 10 hours, mid 11 hours. So there was a similar thing with Courtney where like, I think her first 5 or 6 years in the sport, promising results, but not at her current level. It's like this really, exactly, Jeff, like that really steady progression.
Right.
Which
I
Courtney
think Mike Ambrose once said like he had no idea what he was getting when he signed Courtney. In terms of like signing an athlete that then went on to redefine the sport over the next 8 years and become their like face of their brand. In 2016, Courtney like showed commanding like every bit of respect she got, like she deserved. And she was winning races in a commanding fashion. But 2011 to 2016, glimpses of excellence, glimmers. But
so and this is more just like a call out to anyone that's listening that's either an aspiring pro or not where they want to be. Like, you are not like stuck in your position. Like, I think Riley's a great example. Courtney's a great example where it's like, if you just keep putting the work in and you're intentional and you're deliberate, things can come to you.
Dude, Riley's first 100 was the Vermont 100 in July 2016 at 21 years old in just under 25 hours. Like,
also important to note, Riley's run Western States and didn't have the day they wanted at Western States, like knows the course, has paced other runners at Western States. And I'd be super interested to hear their take on a lot of these things. And hopefully we'll tune in over the next week or so if they're on some podcasts. But like, was it the switch to Boulder? Was it kind of leaning into like, hey, I want to treat this more professionally and really like do this? Was it like growing just beyond the kind of Cuyahoga Trails New York scene? But I think, Finn, your message, I try to preach that as much as possible. Like, have patience. I think I was reaching out to brands for 5 years, like trying to find some type of brand support so I could afford doing races. And like for 5 years got absolutely nothing and like kept trying to notch my way up with better results. And like good things do take time. And it's really easy to see the sensationalized, like Hayden Hawks shows up at Speed Goat and he's the best in the world and he wins CCC a couple months later. That's awesome that was his lived experience. And like, that's not the typical narrative in the sport. And if you look at a lot of these athletes, they've been at it for a really long time. And the number of lessons, and I'm sure like with, ultra sign up, I think is always like 20% low on the actual races someone's done. I bet Riley's around 50 or 60 races into their ultra career. I'm sure there's 40 or 50 like blips or mess ups or errors in there or lessons that they've taken from that race and brought forward with them to have the level of excellence that, got them a golden ticket at Javelina in 2023 that like was a near miss in 2024 that let them win in 2020. Oh, I guess, sorry, 2 years off, 2022, whatever. The fact that it's in the fall and not in the calendar year of Western States, my brain, it can't handle these maths.
I hear you.
All of that to say, what we saw on Saturday was a long time coming. And, in terms of brand value, like,
dude,
it's really important to remember that when you're negotiating with brands, because it's not the 500 hours of training you're putting in that, are your work that bring you value. It's the Vermont 100 when you were 21 years old. Like, it's when you started running. That is when you started building toward this career and your aerobic base. And all of the work you put in up until that point where you might get a brand partnership, that's your foundation. Like that is so important.
I wish that we had, I'm going to call it a budget surplus tracker in the sport, where we could somehow know how much money was left on the table by brands, either through shrewd negotiating and or situations where like they offered to an athlete goes somewhere else, so that that pile of cash exists. You know,
The hindsight is 2020 tracker.
The hindsight is 2020. We can see clearly now.
If coach had just put me in fourth quarter, well, we'd be state champs.
But I could throw a football over the mountains.
All right, boys, you've gotten your Napoleon Dynamite quotes out of the way. It seemed like you were about to say something of substance, Finn.
Well, here's the thing. No, because Instagram is nothing if it isn't hyperbolic. And like a lot of the questions here around the rally performance, I'm not saying they're hyperbolic, but like it's definitely jumping to conclusions. One of them is, is Riley Brady the early favorite to win Western? Are you buying or selling this, Jeff?
I got to look at the start list. Jeff, you brought up a really good point in that Riley has run Western States before. And just having that experience of completed the whole course, like that matters.
So,
yeah,
I mean, here's the thing. Riley versus, for example, Fuzhou.
Yeah. I mean, I still stand by, I think Lin Chen's going to get, Lin Chen did get.
Yeah. Lin Chen got the golden ticket.
Okay. What Lin Chen did last year up to the river was pretty phenomenal. Like Lin Chen's in that conversation. Fuzhou's definitely in that conversation. I think Riley's in that conversation.
Rachel Drake is in that conversation.
Consistently in that conversation. I think Rachel has had enough adjacent experience at Western States with her immaculate husband's performances over the last 45 years that she's in that conversation, right? Even if she hasn't raced. She did race last year.
Yeah, she top 10 last year.
Guys, I had a really rough race last year. I blacked out.
Yeah, you were in a spot. You were.
Forgive me, Rachel.
In a place.
For I have sinned. But no, I think right now, Riley's a stock that I'd be buying for sure. Riley's not a stock. Riley's a human, and there's many months until Western States, and you have to kind of see what happens. Definitely worth paying attention to what tune-up races they decide to do. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they wanted to make a statement and win canyons. And could they win canyons? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If they want to make a bigger statement, go break Katie Scheide's record at canyons. Win every U.S. Golden Ticket race this year.
Oh my gosh! Sweep the Golden Ticket Series,
right? and
God,
when
that would be
you
amazing.
Have that sponsor conversation, make sure they're retroactively giving you those bonuses for sweeping the most competitive races in this country this year.
And then you buy stock in that brand that's investing in Riley's performances.
Feel so bad about the Rachel Drake slip a couple minutes ago. Still living that one out.
I think one thing that I want to. Oh, go ahead, Brett.
I was just gonna say, this women's race is. I think it's really dynamic, or it's going to be really dynamic because of all the names that were mentioned that were like, they could win this race. They could win this race. They could win this race. I don't even think we said Heather Jackson. Heather Jackson had an off day at Black Canyon, but I think Heather could win Western States too. It's that's going to be. It'll be very interesting to see what between now and last weekend in June looks like.
I will say, and again, there's still many golden tickets to be handed out at Tarawera and at Canyons and Chianti, etc. But I do think that this women's field at Western right now is more wide open than it has been, I would say, in the last 2 to 3 years.
So, and I'm not saying this is just defined by Katie's training block last year, but if we were to see a Emily Hawgood, a Rachel Drake, a Riley Brady go do effectively a 50-day training block in Flagstaff with everything meticulously planned out for the Western States course. Does that change how wide open the race is? Was the race like Katie Scheide's this year for sure? Or was it like that we also witnessed what Katie was doing going into that race that kind of put all of us like in this like,
yeah,
I wouldn't want to race her.
If I only saw the Canyons performance, but I didn't get to see the training like before or after, I would have been less confident. But then being able to see like what she was doing going into Canyons, and then the like 120-mile week right after Canyons, just leading that into a massive flag training block, then it was like, yeah, she's not losing this race.
So we see this connection between Strava Dark Horse. If it's a Jeopardy before and after category,
Mm-hmm.
we need to nail that. Yeah. I mean, having insight to Katie's training certainly like put me in a place of like, oh,
yeah, which was like kind of a flex
this
too,
is lethal.
because like Katie doesn't have to publicly share her training. Like she could be secretive and be like, no, I don't want people to know what I'm doing. I don't want people to know if that I am. But then Katie's just like, you can see how good I am at running right now. Like, that's fine. Like, you still have to beat me on the day. I think that's so badass.
Me too. Yeah. By the way, I love that. And again, I think as like the most competitive races and golden ticket events converge in our sport increasingly, we're going to see more people like Riley who are in this awesome power position where they don't need to take golden tickets. They get to redistribute them, you know, like, I like that. Like, can we start getting like, instead of getting the tickets, can we get some sort of award for having had the influence of redistributing tickets down the line, you know?
Yeah. The not in my house like award.
Yeah. No. Okay, we got to talk about the Appalachian Trail / through hiking to golden ticket pipeline. This is the ode to the power hikers out there.
Yes.
I want to start with Joe McConaughy because, and Jeff, you know this pain because you've had a fair number of near misses at golden tickets, especially at Bandera in years past. Talk about this because I
Cole told Joe
knows
after
this.
the race.
Joe knows this. You know it.
Yeah. And I think we threw out Justin Grunwald as like someone who's been on this quest for a while. Joe and I started like chasing golden tickets at the same time. And I was like, Joe, I am super grateful that I've had the opportunity to run Western States 3 times in that window. And I'm more stoked than ever that you get that chance this year. And like, I think it's important as a disclaimer for everyone, right? Like any professional athlete that might seem like they're maybe having an off year, or maybe that year that Joe DNF'd Bandera or, didn't have the race he was looking for, Sean O'Brien, like his training block going into that might've been everything he had. And he had an off day on that day, or like, we can't really say what other stressors, they might have going on in their life. And like the fitness Joe's had, I think, is golden ticket fitness for a long time. And it's maybe he is one of a few people in the sport that has a beautiful outlook on the entire range of ultra races, that he's like stoked to do a 50K. He's stoked to do Barkley. He's going to do a long distance FKT. Honestly, I live vicariously through Joe, and I wish I got to do more of the cool adventures he does. What he, I think, experienced at the finish line, Seth has also raced for some golden tickets. He had a really good roar. He looked fierce. Will, like, cool, calm, collected, was like, yeah, I'm here. Witness me. Joe was like this intense, like, wave of relief. Like, I actually have known I've been able to do this for 8 years, and to actually have the like vindication or proof, validation, like that I did it, is so huge. And like, I'm sure he's been living with that. I cannot wait to see what he does at Western States, because I think more than anyone, his journey started in 2017, right? And like, this is his, I like to say they're like expressions of joy, right? Like this is the final moment he's been living for the last 8 years. I was more stoked on that finish than anything else that happened on the whole weekend. And you look at the community that he also has surrounded himself with, and I think this is part of the beautiful kind of happenstance of COVID and the cowgirl runners in Seattle. But there was one community at that race this weekend that, kind of won the race, and it was cowgirl. Like it was the Seattle running scene. Salt Lake didn't show up. Boulder didn't show up. If you were there, you wanted to be wearing a cow print. And Joe had the best foundation with him there. And I think that goes a really long way. I think knowing that you have a community at your back. Yes. We're talking about Joe right now, but, yeah, I think, knowing that you have a community at your back is huge. And like, sometimes we can forget to believe in ourselves, and having so many other people who believe in us is kind of what you need to move from, on the bubble of 10th, or no, I think he came in 6th place, to Deep Canyon Ranch, but he was, enough minutes out that I think people were thinking he was out of the conversation. Yeah, Joe's a huge inspiration for me, like big role model. I want to do what he does.
Finn, were you watching the live stream, or was it not good time for you?
I watched from Bumblebee onward.
When Seth passed Eli, and it had been when it got publicly known that Seth took over the lead, were people shocked in the live stream, or did people see that coming?
I wasn't paying as much attention to the comment section, so I couldn't say. I know I personally was shocked.
You were shocked. I'm just curious what it looked like.
I was commentating at that point.
You were okay.
Yeah, and I actually stood up and was like, "Guys, I gotta go to the finish." Bye. But the writing was a little bit on the wall with Eli going through the aid stations, and I think when we saw at Cottonwood Gulch what that gap was, and if you look at those little splits that the live tracking gives you, Eli was not running as fast as Seth, into that Cottonwood Gulch section. So we were actively, hypothesizing that we're going to likely see either Will Murray get a course record or Seth Ruhling get a course record. And then it was really their race at that point.
I wonder if just being you and I got to see stare everyone in the eyes as they went through, versus the live stream or the drone shots. Even when Eli was kind of starting to blow up, his form is still very good looking. So I was just curious what was what it was looking like from the live stream versus out there in person, where it was we kind of saw the right, Seth yelled at me at Gloriana when he came through. He was like, "Nobody around me is cooling," and he was I was like, "Oh, Seth thinks he's going to win the race right now, even though he's not in the lead, because he's just looking around, being like, what are these people doing?"
I wanna there's often the track at Meyer High School to the track at Western States, this pipeline of, these races kind of represent one another in this interesting way. They're net downhill. Maybe it's a far-fetched connection, but it's definitely been made in the past. El Dorado Creek at Western States, every year that I've run it, and the last, I think, many years, Tyler Green, when he comes into El Dorado Creek, asks, who in front of me has gotten in the river. And he's getting in the river. That's 90 seconds probably at El Dorado Creek, to get into the river and to get out of the river. That's I use that as a kind of direct analog to Seth, making that recognition that, people aren't taking on water or cooling at Gloriana Mine. If Seth wants to put himself in a good place, he'll carry that with him to Western States. And even if it's only 70 degrees in the base of that climb, getting in El Dorado Creek, it's one of these I think Tyler Green hacks at Western States that he's kind of figured out. Jim, I think, notoriously always gets in El Dorado Creek. Whether you think you need it or not, you need it.
Yeah, I interpreted that Seth comment as sort of like disbelief that he's bringing a gun to a knife fight. Like, I think he came into the race thinking it's 2025. I thought this was 2025 ultra running. Like, really? Like, you guys are playing by 2017 rules? Like, okay, all right,
Yeah.
I'll take this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely kind of the vibes that I got from it. And it wasn't even like cocky or arrogant. It was like disbelief. Like how am I the only one right now who's putting ice cubes in a bandana? Like, it's pretty archaic, but for some reason I'm the only one doing it.
So yeah, let's talk quickly about Seth too, because in addition to having one of the most beautiful strides in all of ultra running, he's an absolute thoroughbred in terms of talent, and love what he's doing too on the media side, making sure that the Boulder Boys are putting out episodes on a regular basis. But yeah, I mean, if I'm playing like an initial guessing game, I feel more confident about Riley at Western than Seth. Like for whatever reason, I have concerns about Seth at the 100-mile distance, not from a talent standpoint, but just, I don't know. Like, if I had to classify him, I see him as that like 50 to 100K guy. And I hope that, by the way, he's clipping this part of our episode and putting it on repeat in his headphones and using it for motivation. But that's just how I feel right now.
It's his own words. Like he said, like it's not a secret that he has a hard time staying mentally engaged in these longer races. In terms of stock over Riley or Seth, I'm going Riley all the way. And that's not because I don't think Seth can do it, but like Riley has a bunch of experience to back up that they can crush a 100-mile race.
Seth's never run 100.
Exactly. Experience is so much. But if the issue that Seth has with longer races is staying mentally focused and engaged, that's a pretty hard issue to overcome in your first 100. And like it can totally, work out in his favor. I think disengaging for the first 25 miles might be a good thing. But when you hit Robinson Flat, like you need to be willing to engage, make contact, keep contact, and at least get to a place where Drew Holman can pace you and make sure you don't mess up from there to the finish.
Yeah. Western States, it's such a hard race to stay engaged in because you have so many of those environmental factors working against you that just, they just get in your way. And then it's so easy to just, okay, well, I'll just hike to this next switchback. Okay, I'll just hike to this next switchback. Okay, let me like one more minute at this aid station. Like, let me get this, and then like everything's disappeared by that point.
Yeah, that doesn't fly. I think Seth is hands down one of the most talented runners in the sport. And like, there are only a couple runners I've ever actually seen their name on a starting list and decided to do that race because they're doing it, because I want to see how I stack up against the best. And like, I chose Quad Rock 25 miler in 2023 because Seth was doing it. Tried to do Canyons 50K last year because Eli was doing it, right? Like Jesh, this race, I was like, yeah, I want to see what it's like to try to run against one of the fastest guys in the sport right now. Seth has all the talent. He has, I think, the resources, the skill set. I think I saw something in the live chat that he's currently self-coached. Is that right?
I think.
Well, he works with Vic on nutrition. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Regardless
I can't remember
if he's self-coached or not, he's surrounded himself with a really good group of runners who do know that race and the 100-mile distance quite well. And like, if Seth had Drew's composure and headspace, holy cow, that would be a terrifying combination. So if you can find a mentor from here until Western States and Drew Holman and just try to, understand kind of how to stay engaged for that 100-mile distance, Seth has, his potential is, he should be as exciting as someone like, Killian entering the race or David Roche entering the race.
Yeah, totally.
Hey, one of the ways you stay engaged is you just make the race shorter for yourself, and you aim for a sub 14-hour finish.
It can happen.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, gosh, that's still 6.5 hours longer than what Seth ran.
Well, but he's run
Saturday.
CCC. He's had a strong CCC, and that's what 10.
He was just under 11 hours
Just
at
under 11
CCC
hours.
in
Yeah.
2023. So
Yeah.
only a few more hours to add to that, and like 35 more degrees.
But Jeff, to the same point you made about Cowgill kind of being out there in force, I wanted to give a shout out to the Boulder boys. Not only were they there kind of traveling as a unit, but we're putting out content before and after to kind of document the whole scene. I love that. Love the format that they're rolling with, kind of an ode to Coffee Club for trail. And I mean, I don't know what the post they made was. It was like, we win 2025 races in 2025
Yeah, I think that's what it says. I still don't quite understand.
I mean, it's kind of self-evident, but like, is there any other ulterior definition there that we should know about?
I mean, that's a lot of races. So
kind of like really, trail is trail, right?
Yeah, I don't really quite understand it. I mean, like,
wait, were you interpreting it as they're going to win 2,025 races in 2025? Is that what you were thinking, Brett?
I mean, if I'm reading it at face value, that's a lot of racing.
That's a lot of races.
Yeah.
I think the initial question you'd asked, Finn, was around these, AT to the race and
the pipeline.
We got
the through hiking.
Yeah, the pipeline. I mean, I want you to tell me more about Tara Dower's running experience because I don't know, but like, it is worth noting that Joe McConaughy has like a low 4-minute mile from college, and that he's always been a competitive like track runner.
Yeah, Joe is fast.
Joe is very fast.
So with Tara, if you're out there, if you're listening, you're watching, I would guess that Tara has 99% name recognition. I bet she even had 90% before the AT. Like, she's definitely like a stronger runner, figurehead in the community. Great results at Run Rabbit, Umstead. We were talking about this on the podcast. Like, she's run some fast marathons, like I think around 3 hours. I bet she could run an even faster one right now just based off her Black Canyon fitness. I bet she could probably dip closer to 245. Really strong runner. Like, this didn't come out of nowhere. I think the question that people like myself had, like I even kind of admitted this to her in our interview, was like, to me, it's just a question of recovery and fatigue resistance. Like, the start of this race is 4.5 months removed from you setting an overall FKT on the AT. I would assume that you're just starting your first training block. That would be a huge victory. Like, how are you able to bounce back that well from such a grueling endurance feat, one of the best performances in the history of our sport, and get ready for what might be the most competitive race on American soil right now? And not only get ready for it, but then go 20 minutes under course record, almost win the thing, and get a ticket to go Western States. Like, it's just, it's unreal, So I think there was sort of that narrative that maybe was dogging her a little bit en route to Saturday's race, and just doubt, because I'm sure that there were people that thought, oh, like, she's just a thru hiker, Joe's just a thru hiker. Like, these are all people that are just really good at plodding along 3-4 miles an hour, Appalachian Trail treadmill. They don't belong at races like Black Canyon. So, I mean, I've always known Tara was a good athlete. For me, I was just blown away by how well she was able to consolidate recovery and then consolidate a training block. Because, I mean, you were talking about this, Jeff, offline, like people who can take advantage of getting fit in kind of like the quote unquote off seasons in our sport. She's one of them, right? Like, she totally took advantage of the moment.
And it's interesting to hear you say that, because I typically think of like the off season for so many runners, it's post UTMB. Post this September 100-mile race schedule. If you don't race a 100 in September, and you're like, the year that World's Championships 2022 was in Thailand, it was like in November. So I was like training very hard for that race. And then I was like, wait a minute, Bandera is only a month away. Like, I'm not going to take a break here. Like, I have quite a bit of fitness. I should just use that, because no one else is going to show up to the race with the training block that I just did. The fact that Tara finished the Tara, sorry, 4.5 months ago, and was able to get some recovery and a training block in there. That is truly crazy. That is hard for my mind to comprehend. It's, the spoon bending.
There is no spoon, Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And, I would, maybe you guys touched on this in your interview. I haven't had time to listen to it yet, but I definitely will, because you've been teasing some great talking points. But what has the, the new contract, new resources, get to, build the team, with working with more nutritionists, coaching, strength work, how much does, getting to build out that team contribute to better quality recovery from the AT and, leading into this block? I would love to hear about that, just that kind of a jump in quality of training.
Yeah. I mean, Tara seems to be proving out that there is no such thing as over racing. It's just a question of maybe under recovering and not following the latest playbooks and building a great team around you. But maybe the people like 2006 Carl Meltzer wasn't off the mark from a scheduling standpoint.
Yeah.
It's just more are you putting the things in place? I mean, David Roche would say the same thing, right? David will say, race as much as you want. If you can recover between these things, have a day.
Dude, I love it.
Yeah, and look at Jeff Browning. Look at Courtney DeWalter. Courtney had some seasons where she was running 12 races.
Yeah,
7 of which were high profile in a season. Jeff Browning has won 6 or 7 hundreds in a single summer.
Yeah,
there are runners who make it happen. I think what's notable here is that 3 to 4 mile an hour for, almost 40 days.
It's a different
stretch.
system. Yeah.
And then the speed that takes to run 20 minutes under the course record at Black Canyon. The sheer disbelief that Riley Brady broke that course record by 29 minutes. In the live chat, people were like, wait, is this right? Am I seeing this right? 29 minutes? So to run 20 minutes under that course record, yeah, again, the spoon does not exist. It's hard to comprehend, because I think you need to forget the playbook. And the playbook I operate by is if I have a big 100-mile race, I'm going to give myself a couple weeks to be good to myself and definitely not try to lean back into running. And I've never done a 40 mile or 40 hour, 40 day effort. It's at that point, is it just life? Do you just keep doing that every day forever? And speaking of which, Hike with Punisher is doing that right now. And he's 40 days into this coast to coast to coast through trail.
So I had this crazy thought for both of you guys. After talking with Tara, I thought to myself, how much of my muscle soreness and mental fatigue and all this stuff after a long run or a hard workout or a race is completely psychosomatic, because I have convinced myself that I'm supposed to be those things.
It's actually because I'm supposed to be those. It's big recovery that's convinced you of these things.
Oh my gosh, dude. Big recovery's watching. They want
Trigger
me to
point,
consume all the compression
roll
boots.
recovery.
Oh,
8 hours of sleep.
Dude, it's not over
full
racing.
REM cycle.
I mean, it's not over racing. It's just under recovering. That's just big recovery propaganda right there.
That's your watch telling you you're 794 hours from being recovered.
Yeah.
You're I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, you're right. There is no spoon. What if I'm not actually tired?
I mean, Finn, to actually answer that, I very much believe, the psychosomatic side of this sport. And I've had an experience this last year that has definitely brought that front and center. Our brains and our body, it's all one system, right? And if you're going to tell yourself that like, nah, I don't know if I can beat Adam Mary in this race tomorrow after live broadcasting today. Like, that's kind of sending a signal to your body in some way, shape, or form. Brett, you did great.
You guys
but
both gave yourselves permission to do the live stream Saturday and then have great races on Sunday. I'm sure if you had a different narrative in your head, that would have affected the races.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
Matters so much. It's so important
because it's all prep. It's like not just mental prep, and like we talk about these physiological adaptations or whatnot, heat training, like high carb fueling. Like it is as much. It's one system. It's as much in your head as it is in your body. And like I did a lot of heat training for the 2023 Western States, but every single time I was in that sauna, I was visualizing the course step for step and going through like every aid station and how it was going to go. And like, I'd probably put that as higher and more important than the actual heat training itself. The fact that Tara has this can-do attitude, it's hard to replicate that. And doubt is, it's like a fungus. It like grows really, really quickly and it can be rampant. If you have that self-belief and like, no, I can do this, that's going to impact your sleep. It's going to impact your training. It's going to impact all of your outlooks going into that.
Jim Walmsley has a famous quote, "Off days are contagious." And sometimes when I'm deep in training blocks, I believe that, not just like on the mental side, but even just like if you take a rest day, they kind of, for me at least, because I'm probably a more externally motivated person, they cascade. Anyways. All right, we're almost coming up on time here. I think we got time for maybe two more topics. This is more of a statement, and this is an ode to you guys. It's to Jamil, Corinne, Chris, AJW, everyone a part of the live stream. But Jamil put out the numbers that this was the second most popular live stream in Mountain Outpost history. It only trails the 2024 Hard Rock 100, and that's with like not even factoring in the views that are probably going to accumulate over the next few weeks as people kind of retroactively check it out. So I think it was 72,000, which is wild. Mm-hmm. Thoughts on that, Brett?
Yeah. I mean, so I guess there's going to be people like yelling out into their, on the run right now. Like, what about Western States? Western States was on the Western States YouTube channel. So that doesn't count towards this I guess comparison, because this is just all Mountain Outpost. But the fact that even just midway through, I remember Jamil was like he was like putting the numbers into like spreadsheets midway through the race and putting them in the like media WhatsApp group chat and being like, look at these live stream numbers. And it was just like he had like the last 4 years and they'd nearly doubled like each year. And at whatever point that he decided to send it all to us, like it had already doubled. And I think that's just kind of like, that's just where we're getting in the sport. And also that's just somewhat the expectation that's going to come from like an Aravaipa race. It's like they're putting on a live stream. We hear about the hype, the preview shows. Like the Chasing Gold interviews that Skylar did were awesome. And then when you put all that together and like they keep adding bits and pieces to the live stream every year to keep, enhancing the coverage. Like the entire main studio was at Deep Canyon Ranch this year instead of the finish line because it was more centralized and just easier to juggle everything from. Just that kind of commitment to not excellence, but like the commitment to continuing to grow like your own live stream project as the sport grows, just leads to that like compounding exponential growth.
I think their production team is all time. I think what they're doing, it is feeding each other. Mm-hmm. Black Canyon's success as a race is helping the live stream reach more, and people are seeing the live stream and they're wanting to go to that race next year. And like, the Trail Run Film Festival this last year had a film of urban run groups in New York City wanting to focus on Black Canyon Ultras as like the race choice, for their destination race. Like it's not really coincidence. The work that Mountain Outpost, Zach, Jamil, like all of the employees there are actually putting in to making an excellent product. One of the takeaways we saw on the live stream on Sunday with Eric and Chris both coming over from the tri scene was all of these triathletes saying like, wow, Ironman could learn a lot from this live stream. Mm-hmm. Wow, the tri culture and bike culture could learn a lot from this live stream. And that is someone who's the person who's both visioning the race as being a great golden ticket race and building that for a decade, and also trying to capture that in a way that reflects how great the race is. And like, if you think the live coverage is great, it's because the race is great. Like, go check it out. I think it's going to just continue to elevate year after year. And the amount of work that goes into it is astonishing.
Yeah, Jeff, you brought up a really good point too. It's like the entire like production team, when you're just around them, because you are like, you're just like right next to them. You can tell they all genuinely care about the quality of the product that they are producing. Like they're not just like going through the motions, like employee working for Big Recovery. Like they care about what they're doing, and you can totally feel it like across every single job that everyone has.
Yeah. I guess selfishly for all of us that work in media, it's awesome to get this gradual validation that there are other people out there that like to consume this sport, and I think philosophically it's like never underestimate the popularity of your own interests, like if you have an inkling that like this could catch, probably could. Brett and I have talked about this, Jeff. There are channels out there for watching dominoes fall kind of like on repeat that get like millions of live stream viewers, like I think the sky is the limit here. It's wild.
Yeah.
So
can we entertain the women's race starting sooner?
This
or
is a perfect,
starting
yes.
first?
Yep. And I pulled up the exact, let me see here. I pulled up the exact question box response. So this person says, quote, or I said, any topics, trends, athletes, etc., that we better discuss. And they said, women's race starts first. Let us find the men on the live stream and see the women first. I have some opinions here, and they might contradict what you guys say. So I'll let you guys go first.
I've always thought that would be a really cool, thing to try. Partly because I've always wanted to see what the dynamic of some of these women's fields would be like when there are no men just in the way. And I don't even say like men to work with or work off. A lot of times it's just straight up dudes that are in the way because they like go out way too hard, and then Riley has to go around like 65 people. I love that point about the live stream too, of like we get to watch like Heather and Riley like duking it out by themselves at the front for the entirety of the day. I think it would change the dynamic of the racing for one, and that's definitely one of the most that's one of the most interesting parts of this this like comment that I would like to see through.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts. My first thought I'll share was anecdotally as the commentator at Deep Canyon Ranch when there were 6 of the top 10 women all at Deep Canyon Ranch getting aid at the same time. And it was without a doubt the most exciting part of that aid station. Eli and Seth ran into Black Canyon City and the camera bounced. And it was like, well, this is super cool. There was a lot happening here, like right now, you know, the shuffle of places of who came in and who left first was like very evident, and what each left with, you know, it was clear Aaron Clark learned from Javelina and like left fully iced down, and, you know, seeing who each person was leaving with as a pacer, it was like a very exciting moment that was just not captured because the lead men went through Black Canyon City. The second thought I have is there's a challenge in coordinating this. Not that it can't be done, but with the fact that this is a participatory sport with professionals in it. And that is a pretty hard one to sell to all racers. The women are starting, the women's race is going to start at 6 a.m. and the men's race is going to start at 7 a.m. Like if it's an hour distance or difference, maybe that's more like addressable. And that might have been the right amount based on the finish times. Like lead men and women were about an hour apart. But you might have people who are running the race together who are like, wait, we have to start at different times now. It might make a better viewing experience for the live stream, which is definitely a high priority for Jamil. But I think at the end of the day, the highest priority is that every runner who's running is having a good experience and staying safe. And that leads me to my third reflection on this, which is something like if UTMB were to start the women's race 2 hours earlier, if Western States were to start the women's race at 3, you know, or 4 instead of 5, all of a sudden you actually give a lot of women the opportunity to be trying to chase that, like, you know, sunset deadline of like, hey, I want to finish Western States in the light of day. Or for UTMB, you know, that 2-hour buffer actually might make it so this huge group of pros that show up to that race, it's very easy to pick out and parse out the dynamics in the women's field. And like, I want a race to test it out that has a great live stream. And I think it's a little different if a race that doesn't have a live stream tests it out. But I want a race that has a great live stream to test it out and see what it's like one year, because I think it would be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, I want to riff on one of your points in a second, but Brett, I'm curious, how do you think race dynamics might change? Like, what's one example of how this changing setup would affect the dynamics in the women's race?
Well, I guess before I go into that, I do love Jeff's point about just it being the mass participation sport, and like the logistics behind that would just be an absolute nightmare. So it's like for that particular race, it doesn't make sense at all. Then my mind jumped to something like what if Worlds did something like this, where it's like it's elites only. It's everything's much more controlled. It's like, okay, then we start the women's race an hour before the men's. And also because
Totally.
like there's not 500 people, you know, like starting in one wave and the other. It's like a small field and a small field. How does it change?
Yeah. Does Katie Scheid get the course record at UTMB this last year? Does Katie Scheid get the course record at Canyons this last year?
Yeah.
Without like actively racing in the men's field and picking off leaders in the men's race. Right. I mean, it changes in terms of like who you're racing, right?
Yeah, totally. And like we see this every year with the start of UTMB, where you see like a nice pack forms at the very front with like 20 guys in it. And then, you know, there is a pack of women, like they're like, you know, 20, 30 women are all within like 30 seconds of each other, but it's a little bit more stringy because there's so many men like interspersed within. It's like, if all those guys were not there, I don't see why that same women's pack wouldn't just formulate into like a pretty good sized pack, just like we see on the men's side. And like, I just think that's something I would want to see. Like, I saw it happen once. The last time I ran Lake Sonoma, when it was the World's qualifier, like just kind of organically it happened, which was nifty. Because I was split, I was right in between the two. So like I saw this 20 guys as they're going up the road before it goes into single track, and I'm like right on the very back of it, and I looked behind me and there was no other men, but instead there was a pack of like 20, 25 women. And I was like, how did this happen? but like, this is really cool. Like, I was like, I kind of want to slow down and like watch this race unfold, because this is an interesting dynamic where it's like they're all about to go hit the single track together as one big pack. So it's just a racing dynamic that I feel like we don't get to see enough in women's racing for the reason of the mass start. And yeah, it's definitely a tough logistical nut to crack, but I would love to see a race try it.
I think that UTMB is really the race that should do it, but I don't think they will do it before someone else shows them that it can be done. And like UTMB, it makes sense because that entire city is a cluster and there's races starting all the time and like everyone has to figure out everything. But having the women's race on display starting 2 hours before the men's race at UTMB, I think would be a better product all around in terms of race experience and live stream experience. I would love to see Canyons try to pull this off for, you know, their race this spring. Like I don't want to lean on like the excuse of like logistically for a race director, it would be hard, so we're not going to entertain it. I think someone needs to entertain it and a race should execute it and just like see what happens, because, you know, my hunch is that for the first 2 hours of that race, we're going to see women get more airtime. We're going to see the leaders of that women's race grow in terms of household name popularity. And like, yeah, the eyes should be on them. Like what they're doing is amazing. But it takes someone and again, it's with a good live stream. Like I would totally expect High Lonesome with like their advocacy and what they've tried to do with equity in the sport to do this, but it doesn't really make a difference if it's not also a great live stream to offer, you know, the spectating experience. And I think Mountain Outpost is doing their live stream, so it might just be excellent. But I'd love to see it in a race with a much bigger field and how it pans out.
I know we're basically at time. I'll offer my opinion. I'll say one thing. You guys both made great points. And both of you echoed this, but logistically, we're in a tough spot because, like you both said, we're talking about the professional side of the sport in a business model that's participation based. That's super difficult to change things with. Personally, I have never wanted either of these fields to have to deal with overlap to begin with. I've always wanted them, like as a super fan, I have wanted to see both products exist independently on separate days just so that I can consume more and focus on both of them. Like I don't want either field to be lost in the priorities of live stream coverage or confusion about where people are or why a camera's not there. I don't want either race to be the race within the race, you know?
You're going Tour de France model here.
Yeah, like didn't Ironman separate their world championships? Like one was in Kona and the other was not in Kona. So
I think I lean towards that, honestly, just because I want to watch both races in peace, you know?
I just want to sit on my couch with both of my projectors, 200-inch screens, watching both live streams.
And get to see the random baller, Will Murray, have his moment in the men's race.
Yep.
And get to see a course record go down by 30 minutes in the women's race. I wanted to plug for Will Murray in there because we didn't really touch on the random baller status, but this race is kind of the OG homage to the random baller, Trueheart Brown. So yeah, huge kudos to Will Murray for showing up and like laying down an elite performance.
And if you want to get more intel on Will, he wrote actually a Strava post, not an upload, but like a post, and the title, like a marketer's dream, how I earned a golden ticket, ... when not many people expected it. That click through it on YouTube would be through the roof. We'll link to it in the show notes. It's excellent. Jeff, Brett, awesome to have you guys on the show. Looking forward to
Finn,
recapping another one of these. Go ahead. Yeah.
Good luck.
Good luck, dude.
You got your big race coming up.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I was telling these guys offline that, you know, the American mind can probably barely comprehend the beauty of Gran Canaria, but it's There's a reason Courtney did this race twice. There's a reason I think Debo came out here twice. Tyler Green came out here. Like if you know, IYK. I'll leave it at that.